Today's daf is daf Lamed Vav, and we're continuing with the laws of tefillin and focused on the brachos on tefillin. Omer of Chizda, Ma sach bein tefillah letefillah chozer umevarich. Rav Chizda says that if you take a hefsek between the tefillin shel yad and the tefillin shel rosh, then you need a second bracha on tefillin shel rosh. He starts talking about something, and therefore the bracha on the shel rosh cannot be related. I'm sorry, the bracha on the shel yad cannot be related to the shel rosh. So the Gemara is medayik in the language of Rav Chizda. Sach in. The only reason he needs a second bracha on his tefillin shel rosh is because he was mafsik lo sach lo. Apparently, it's enough under normal circumstances to make one bracha on the tefillin shel yad, and that bracha will cover him as far as the tefillin shel rosh as well. So the Gemara says, "V'ha sholach Rabbi Chia Breder of Huna Mishmei Rabbi Yochanan al tefillah shel yad Omer Baruch Asher Kitchon V'Tzos Tzvon Lo Niach Tefillin al tefillin shel rosh Omer Asher Baruch Asher Kitchon V'Tzos Tzvon Al Mitzvos Tefillin." So we see that there are two brachos. One bracha is designated for the tefillin shel yad, and a second bracha for the tefillin shel rosh. And the implication is that that's an absolute rule. Whether or not he was sach is irrelevant. The tefillin shel rosh requires its own bracha. Abai v'rova di'amrit shavayu. Abai v'rova would like to reinterpret the statement of Rabbi Yochanan such that now it could be reconciled with the ruling of Rav Chizda. Lo sach mevarech achas, sach mevarech shtayim. That let's interpret Rabbi Yochanan's statement in which he formulates a bracha on the shel rosh, not as a separate bracha that's absolute for every time he puts on the shel rosh, but only in a case where he was sach. Between the tefillin shel yad and the tefillin shel rosh, he interrupted with some sort of a sicha, and therefore the bracha on the tefillin shel yad cannot relate and pater him up for the tefillin shel rosh. He needs a separate bracha, and that's when Rabbi Yochanan formulated the bracha for the tefillin shel rosh. But in essence, Rav Yochanan is just saying the same thing as Rav Chizda, that in event that he interrupted between the tefillin shel yad and tefillin shel rosh, then and only then does he need a separate bracha on the tefillin shel rosh. Tana, sach bein tefillah tefillah, avera hi biyado, v'chozer oleh me'orchei milchama. We find something parallel with regard to what's called the chozrin me'orchei milchama, right? The Kohen Mashiach milchama would have to make an announcement that ish hayore levavo yachzo lebeso, that if there's a soldier in the Israeli army that's afraid, then he should go home, check out. And the Gemara has a brayso that says, why was he afraid? What kind of an avera was he afraid that he might get punished and die in battle? Was it a terrible avera of the averas chamuros? No, it's enough if he was sach, if he interrupted between the tefillin shel yad and the tefillin shel rosh. And the reason why that's called an avera is because now he's going to have to make a second bracha on the tefillin shel rosh. Had he not been sach, without that interruption, then he would not have made that bracha. And in a sense, the bracha that he made on the tefillin shel rosh was a bracha of atola. It was unnecessary. We don't make unnecessary brachas, and that's the avera for which he's considered someone who's afraid. Now, lahalach lamaisa, there is a machlokas rishonim and achronim about whether or not there should be a separate bracha recited on the Tefillin Shel Rosh. And it would seem that the Rambam and the Shulchan Aruch are of the opinion that you don't make a separate bracha on the Tefillin Shel Rosh unless he interrupted. But on the other hand, you find that the Rosh and the Bali Atosa seem to assume that as a general rule, he does make a bracha on the Tefillin Shel Rosh. But the Avera, if he was Sach bein Tefillin Shel Yad, Tefillin Shel Rosh, is that now he's going to have to make two brachos on the Tefillin Shel Rosh. He's going to have to make on the one hand the bracha of Lohaniach, because since he interrupted, he doesn't have a connection between the bracha that he recited Lohaniach on the Shel Yad and the Shel Rosh. And then he has to make another bracha, which is the, shall we say, the inherent or local bracha of Al Mitzvah's Tefillin for the Tefillin Shel Rosh. So he's going to have to make now two brachos on the Tefillin Shel Rosh. But Sach HaKol, if there was no Sach, he would only make two brachos, one on Tefillin Shel Yad and one on Tefillin Shel Rosh. And this machlokes is not really 100% decided in the halacha. And the Ramah is machmir, and he says that, all right, you have to make a bracha on the Tefillin Shel Rosh, even without Sicha, because of the Chachmei Ashkenaz, but nevertheless, he should add Baruch Shein Kvod Malchuso to make sure that it's not a bracha levatol. Now, my minhag in my family is we don't make a bracha on the Shel Rosh, and Baruch Hashem, I never made that bracha in my life. Tana, we learned in the Brisa, Kshu meniach shel yad, v'achkach meniach shel rosh. Ukshu choletz shel rosh, v'achkach choletz shel yad. The Gemara is going to derive from the psukim, the Seder psukim, the Reish and the Seifa, that the bracha on the Tefillin Shel Yad comes first, the Hanocha of the Tefillin Shel Yad comes first. But when he takes off his Tefillin, that's called Chalitzas HaTefillin, that he starts by taking off his Tefillin Shel Rosh. So putting on, he puts on first Tefillin Shel Yad. Taking off, he takes off Tefillin Shel Rosh. Why? Bishleim, the Gemara says, I understand, Kshu meniach shel yad, v'achkach meniach shel rosh, t'chsiv, ukshartem lios hayadecha, v'hadar, v'hayu tol tefillos beinecha. The pasuk starts with Tefillin Shel Yad, and then it continues with Tefillin Shel Rosh. El kshu choletz, and you're telling me that when he takes off his Tefillin Choletz Shel Rosh, v'achkach choletz Shel Yad minolan, Omar Rabba Rav Huna Asbrili, I got an explanation for Rav Huna. Omar Kra, Vayule Totafos Bein Einecha. Now, the word Totafos here is in the plural, and we derive from the plural word Totafos that Kol Zman Shebein Einecha, as long as you have the tefillin on your head, then you shtayim. There should always be two tefillins, two pairs of tefillin, Tefillah Shel Yad and Tefillah Shel Rosh. So at the end of the day, it turns out that you should not be wearing Tefillin Shel Rosh without the Tefillin Shel Yad. So therefore, if he would take off his Tefillin Shel Yad first, he'd be stuck in a situation where he's wearing the Tefillin Shel Rosh without Tefillin Shel Yad. And that's not acceptable because the Torah says, Shtayim Beinei Necha. There should be at the time of Beinei Necha two tefillin. However, the poskim point out that this is only lechatchila. B'di'evid, let's say, for example, a person doesn't have arms, that's called a gidem, and he doesn't wear tefillin shel yad, or he doesn't have a pair of tefillin shel yad, he only has tefillin shel rosh, then he will wear the tefillin shel rosh. So although lechatchila, the tefillin shel rosh should be worn while he's wearing the tefillin shel yad, and not without tefillin shel yad, but in the event that he cannot wear the tefillin shel yad, he will wear the tefillin shel rosh, and he'll make a bracha on the tefillin shel rosh. Now, please make note that the Gemara's conclusion about putting on tefillin shel yad first taking off tefillin shel rosh first, are all based on derivations of the psukim, not based on svara or what we call ta'amim, explanations. But amongst the commentaries, they offer ta'amim, they offer explanations. Again, all these explanations are really begeder, speculations, but I found it very powerful. The speculation is that tefillin shel yad entails or implies an absolute commitment to the action, meaning to the Maisa, to fulfill the mitzvahs of the Torah, whether we understand them or not. Tefillin shel rosh has to do with understanding. And we should never be in a situation where the tefillin shel rosh are telling us, well, I understand the mitzvah, without the tefillin shel yad on my body, because the tefillin shel yad is an absolute commitment to fulfill the mitzvah Torah, whether we understand them or we don't. And that's why when Klal Yisrael accepted the Torah, as we read just 2 days ago, they said Nasa v'nishma. The Nasa is keneged the tefillin shel yad, and the Nishma is keneged the tefillin shel rosh. Nishma means we will understand the Torah. But the shel yad is the critical commitment, which is absolute, and you always have to have the tefillin shel yad, even if you don't have the tefillin shel rosh, but tefillin shel rosh, to say, well, I understand and therefore I fulfill the Torah, but I don't have the tefillin shel yad as an absolute commitment, that's unacceptable. Anyway, Tana Rabbanan. Tefillin me'emasai mevarach aleim mishas hanechosam. Very strange. When do you make the bracha? And the bracha seems to be when you wear the tefillin. I mean, what does that mean when you wear the tefillin? It means after you put on the tefillin, then you make the bracha. Ketzad, what's going on over here? We know that hayamashkim lotzeis lederech umisyari shem yovdu meinicham ukshiagia smanom umashish behem uvarach aleim. In any event, what we see here clearly is that if a person has to go out on the road very early and the time for tefillin has not yet arrived, let's say on a Doraisa level we hold Laila Lavzman tefillin, so he's leaving his house at night, but he's afraid that maybe if he carries his tefillin on this journey, he might lose his tefillin. So therefore, Menicham, he wears them even at night, but he doesn't make a bracha, because we're holding now that Laila Lavzman tefillin. Then, when daylight arrives, and now he can make a bracha, how does he make a bracha? He needs what's called over lasiyos, and the bracha should be before the actual hanacha, but he's already wearing his tefillin. Is memashmesh b'hem uvarach aleim. Rashi explains that being memashmesh b'hem, when he touches his tefillin to make sure that they're in the right place, that itself is like wearing, it's like putting on the tefillin, and therefore he can make a bracha over lasiyos and before the asiyah, when he makes the bracha prior to the mishmush. V'ad masai menicham. What's the latest time to wear tefillin? And again, if we're assuming that Laila lavzman tefillin, then when the day ends, it's already too late to put on tefillin, and therefore tishke achama. With shkias hachama, he can no longer don his tefillin because Laila lavzman tefillin. However, the Gemara now quotes two other opinions. Rabbi Yaakov Omer, Achetichla regel min hashuk. It means that Rabbi Yaakov gives you a longer time period for your tefillin, and that's until some point, which is after nightfall, when there are no longer pedestrians in the street. And we automatically remind ourselves of the laws of Chanukah, of Ner Chanukah, which is also Chetichle Regel Min Hashuk. But we shouldn't equate the two. They're two different halachas. Now, if, according to Rabbi Yaakov, we're talking about a time period after nightfall, then if Laila Lavzman tefillin, it's already after nightfall. You should have taken off your tefillin by nightfall. So apparently, the Bali Atosus understood that Rabbi Yaakov is of the opinion that Laila Zman tefillin, that you could put on tefillin at night. Just the Rabbanon made a gzera, and they said, don't put on tefillin at night. We're afraid you might fall asleep while you're wearing your tefillin, and therefore tefillin at night is not a good idea. But Rabbi Yaakov holds that since the whole business of not putting on tefillin at night is only the Rabbanon, therefore the Rabbanon made the gzera only at a later time, when people begin to retire for the night. No longer are people out on the streets, no one's going shopping anymore, the lights are off, and that's when you might fall asleep. But up until that point, even though it's Lila, you could wear tefillin because Lila's man tefillin. And likewise, Chacham Omer Ad Zman Shena, they extended even a longer period of time. You could, if Lila Zman tefillin, you could wear tefillin at night. Just the Rabbanan made a gzera, and they said, well, don't put on tefillin at night because you might fall asleep, then let's wait until the time that you go to sleep. And here you have nuances of interpretations, whether it means the time that most people go to sleep or the time that you go to sleep and so forth. Modim Chachamim LeRabbi Yaakov, the Chachamim will concede to Rabbi Yaakov, Shem Chalotzon Lotzeis LeBeis HaKisei O Likones LeBeis HaMerchat V'Shokar Chama Shuv Eino Chozer Umenicham. Even the Chachamim are not in favor of putting on tefillin lechatchila ad Zman Shena. Let's say Zman Shena is 11 p.m. and nightfall is at 9 p.m. The Chachamim concede to Rabbi Yaakov that he should not be putting on his tefillin from 9 to 11. So, for example, if he took off his tefillin because he had to go into the bathhouse or to the bathroom, then if it's already nightfall, he should not be putting on his tefillin. However, if he has his tefillin on, that's when the Chacham say, we're not afraid that he'll fall asleep. Ad Zman Sheni can continue wearing his tefillin that he put on earlier up until the time, 11 p.m. when he goes to sleep. Omer Rav Nachman Alochik Rabbi Yaakov v'Rav Chizda v'Rab Bar Huna mitzalu b'hubi urta. According to Rav Nachman, we paskin like Rabbi Yaakov in favor of that opinion that says that even after Shkias HaChama and even after nightfall, people are still out in the streets, you're allowed to wear your tefillin. And in fact, Rav Chizda and Rav Bar Huna would daven Ma'ariv, and they were wearing their tefillin. So that means it was before Tichla Regel Min Hashuk, which, according to Rabbi Yaakov, and we pass like Rabbi Yaakov, you're allowed to wear your tefillin beyond nightfall, beyond Tfilas Arvis, as long as it's not Tichla Regel Min Hashuk. So let's say Arvis was davened at 7, people leave the Shuk at 9. During those 2 hours, from 7 to 9, he's allowed to wear his tefillin. However, Ika Diamri, there's another transmission according to which Ein Halacha Rabbi Yaakov. And here, once again, the Rishonim have a long discussion. What does that mean, Ein Halacha Rabbi Yaakov? Why didn't he just say in the Ika Diamri, Halacha Ki Rabbanan? So apparently, Ein Halacha Rabbi Yaakov could be interpreted in a different way. It doesn't necessarily mean that we're paskening like the Tanakama, like the Rabbanon, and therefore you could wear your tefillin up until the time you go to sleep. Could be you have to wear your tefillin and take them off by Shkias HaChama. And even though at that point there's no real chashash that maybe you'll fall asleep, it's only 7 o'clock, 6 o'clock in the evening, but nevertheless, Laila loves man tefillin. Now, Laila loves man tefillin, which we're going to learn in Mitzvah Sheman on Mid Beis here today, means that he's not allowed to wear tefillin at night. Because now we're dealing with the Doraisa halach of Laila lavs man tefillin. We'll see how the Gemara equates it with Shabbos, that if you hold Shabbos lavs man tefillin, you're not allowed to wear tefillin on Shabbos. And if you hold Laila lavs man tefillin, you're not allowed to wear tefillin at night. So it could possibly be that Ein Halacha Rabbi Yaakov doesn't mean Lakula, that we're going to accept the Rabbanan sheet and allow you to wear tefillin until you go to sleep. Could be it's a Chumrah, and we're going to paskin like those opinions that Laila loves man tefillin, and therefore which shkias achama you got to take off your tefillin.